Pam Bondi walked into this hearing expecting another routine oversight session. Another day of polished talking points, rehearsed answers, and carefully managed headlines. But what happened instead was something far more damaging. Because Congressman Joe Neguse didn't show up to score cheap political points. He came in with receipts, with names, with numbers, and with one simple strategy: force Pam Bondi to answer direct questions about what's happening inside the Department of Justice.
Attorney General Bondi, 6 days ago, you posted online, quote, "If you come for law enforcement, the Trump administration will come for you," end quote. I want to show you just a brief video. It's about 30 seconds, and I'll ask you a couple questions about it.
You guys are disgusting, man. Hey, you guys are disgusting. I'm former law enforcement. You're disgusting. You are the Nazi. You are the Gestapo. You can't see it because you're chasing your pension, right? Your pension, your retirement, right? That's what runs your life, your retirement.
The sad thing is they're not even going to get their pension because it's going to be worthless.
And shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. Yeah. Fuck that. Yeah.
Attorney General Bondi, that man works for you now, right?
Who was that, Congressman?
The man in that video, the one who was in the police-worn body cam footage, the one allegedly yelling, "Kill him," at police officers on January 6th, his name is Jared Wise.
He does work for us.
He works for you at the Department of Justice.
He does.
This is an individual whom a federal grand jury indicted for 2 felonies and 4 misdemeanors related to his participation in the attack on January 6th. One of those charges was forcibly assaulting, resisting, opposing, impeding, intimidating, and interfering with police with the intent to commit another felony. This is who you choose as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States of America to hire at the Department of Justice. Someone on video yelling, "Kill him," at police officers? Right?
I believe he was pardoned by President Trump.
Oh, he was pardoned. You're right. You're right. Pardoned by President Trump for his offense. Pardoned for yelling, "Kill him," at police officers. And yet you expect hardworking police officers across the country to believe that you take law enforcement seriously. You could imagine the reaction of so many folks across the country hearing the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States refuse to even condemn what that individual whom you've now hired did. But in any event, let's talk a little bit about some of the other divisions within the Department of Justice and what's happened over the last year. You're familiar with the Public Integrity section of the DOJ's Criminal Division. I think it's referred to as PIN. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know which presidential administration under which the PIN was first created?
I can tell you what administration that the weaponization was ended under.
I'll reclaim my time. This wasn't a trick question.
You don't get to
Madam Attorney
reclaim
General.
your time.
Madam Attorney General.
Because I don't like it.
Mr. Chairman, will you explain to the witness that he does
reclaim?
reclaim his time?
Because I don't answer a question to your satisfaction.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam Attorney General, the time belongs to the gentleman from Colorado.
The president under which PIN was created was Gerald Ford. It was created after Watergate. I'm not asking a question, Madam Attorney General. The administration under which it was created was Gerald Ford. When you first started as the Attorney General of the United States, there were 35 people working in that office. There are now 2 people working in that office because you have gutted it. How many people work for the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team in the Criminal Division today?
Can I answer the question about PIN?
I've asked you a question. How many
You've
people
asked
work?
me a question, but you don't
How
want
many
the
people
answer.
work
I'm not
for the
gonna answer your
National
questions the way you
Cryptocurrency
want.
Enforcement Team? You won't answer how many
I'll
people?
answer PIN.
You.
PIN will not be
you know what?
weaponized.
You know what?
What's
Madam
funny
Attorney
about
General,
this?
I'll say to the chairman.
What's funny about
Chairman,
this?
you know what the answer is? And I think I
What's
understand
funny
why the
about
Attorney General
this?
does not want to answer the question. Because you eliminated the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team last year. So I understand why you don't want to tell the American people who works there.
Yeah, I
no one
understand
works
why
there
you don't want to
anymore,
talk about
Madam
Mohammed
Attorney
Solomon
General.
in
So,
your district.
In any event,
who
I would
murdered
just-
people.
Mr. Chairman, will you stop the clock so his time is not wasted by
I've
the
been
witness?
very generous with allowing extra time when we have these little disputes.
I understand.
You got the time, Mr. Neguse.
I might as well ask the chairman these questions.
I'd be happy
because
to
what
answer
is
some of your
what's
questions.
profound, the questions I've
Profound?
asked,
The crime in your
I've
district.
asked, Mr. Chairman, are not trick questions. They're not gotcha questions. They're actually basic questions about how the Department of Justice functions and the unwillingness of this Attorney General to answer them in good faith. When a member of Congress asks how many people work at the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team and the Attorney General refuses to answer it, it is not a coincidence. It's because she eliminated the team. Why? Because her boss, the President of the United States, is making money hand over fist, $1.4 billion over the course of the last year through cryptocurrency holdings. I think what is happening at the Department of Justice is a disgrace, Mr. Chairman, and I would urge you to gain control of this hearing. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
And when those answers didn't come, the silence said more than any statement ever could. What started as a tense exchange quickly turned into one of the most uncomfortable moments of Bondi's time in office. A live hearing, cameras rolling, members watching, and an attorney general who suddenly looked like she was losing control in real time. But the most explosive part wasn't just what Neguse asked. It was what his questions seemed to reveal about who's really being protected, what parts of the DOJ have been hollowed out, and why some of the most basic facts about law enforcement suddenly became impossible to say out loud. The hearing began with Neguse going straight for the contradiction that had been hanging over Bondi's recent public statements. Just days earlier, Bondi had posted a message online warning that anyone who came after law enforcement would have to answer to the Trump administration. It was a bold statement, clearly meant to project strength and loyalty to police. But Neguse saw an opening. Instead of debating her slogan, he decided to test whether her actions matched her words. And he did it in a way that instantly changed the tone of the room. He asked for a short video clip to be played. At first, it seemed like a setup for a standard oversight question. But then the footage began. Body cam video from January 6th. A man shouting at officers, calling them disgusting, calling them Nazis, telling them they should be ashamed. And then the line that made the room go quiet. Kill him. It was raw, aggressive, and impossible to ignore. Neguse let the moment land before asking the question that shifted the hearing into another gear. That man in the video, he said, now works for the Department of Justice. Is that correct? Bondi confirmed it. The man was Jared Wise, a former law enforcement officer who had been charged in connection with January 6th and later pardoned by President Trump. Bondi's response was immediate and legalistic. Yes, he works there. And yes, he was pardoned. On paper, that answer addressed the question. But Neguse wasn't really asking about legal paperwork. He was asking about credibility. He was asking what message it sends when the nation's top law enforcement official hires someone captured on video screaming violent threats at police officers during one of the most infamous attacks on the Capitol in modern history. And that's where Bondi began to lose the room. Because her answer may have been technically accurate, but it didn't answer the deeper concern. If this administration claims to stand firmly behind law enforcement, how does someone with that history end up on the DOJ payroll? Neguse made it clear that this wasn't about whether a pardon exists. It was about what kind of conduct is now being excused, rewarded, or quietly absorbed into the system. That moment hit hard because it cut through the usual hearing theatrics. There was no need for exaggerated outrage. The contrast was already sitting in plain sight. Bondi's public message was about defending officers. The footage showed a man now working under her yelling violent threats at officers. Neguse understood exactly how powerful that contrast was, and he didn't waste time over explaining it. He simply let the contradiction sit there. That's what made the exchange so effective. Bondi tried to move past it quickly, leaning on the pardon as a shield, but the political damage had already been done. The hearing was no longer about routine oversight. It had become a test of whether Bondi could defend the culture and choices taking shape under her leadership. And from that point on, every answer she gave was going to be viewed through that lens. But Neguse wasn't finished. In fact, the January 6th exchange was only the opening move. After putting Bondi on the defensive over hypocrisy, he pivoted to something even more consequential: the internal dismantling of key DOJ oversight units. This is where the hearing stopped being about symbolism and started becoming about structure. Neguse brought up the Public Integrity Section, often called PIN. For most viewers, that might sound like just another bureaucratic office. But Neguse made sure to frame why it matters. This is the division responsible for investigating corruption by public officials. It was created in the aftermath of Watergate, precisely because the country learned what happens when government power goes unchecked. In other words, this isn't some side office buried in a basement. It's one of the DOJ's most important safeguards against abuse. And according to Neguse, it had been gutted that he started with a simple historical question. Under which administration was the Public Integrity Section created? It wasn't a trick. The answer was Gerald Ford, in the shadow of Watergate. Neguse's point was clear. This office exists because America has already lived through the consequences of corruption at the highest levels. But Bondi immediately tried to shift the conversation. Instead of answering directly or engaging with the point, she pivoted to talking about ending weaponization. It was the kind of answer politicians often use when they want to reframe the issue. But in this setting, it only made the dodge more obvious. Neguse reclaimed his time and laid out the numbers that turned the hearing from tense to deeply uncomfortable. When Bondi first took office, he said, roughly 35 people worked in that section. Now, according to him, only 2 remained. 2 people in the office designed to police corruption inside government. It was a stunning claim, and it landed because Bondi still hadn't offered a clear response. This was where the hearing began to visibly unravel. Neguse wasn't asking for hypotheticals or broad policy views. He was asking for basic staffing facts. How many people are in the unit? What happened to its resources? Why was it reduced? These are the kinds of questions any attorney general should be able to answer instantly. But instead of clarity, viewers got deflection. Bondi tried to redirect. She tried to broaden the topic. She tried to make the exchange about politics instead of numbers. And each attempt only strengthened Neguse's broader point, that the DOJ under Bondi was becoming harder to scrutinize, even by Congress. Oversight hearings work best when answers are straightforward. But when the simplest facts become difficult to state, people start wondering why. Neguse understood that. He wasn't trying to win a shouting match. He was building a pattern. First, a contradiction on law enforcement values. Then, an apparent weakening of the very office meant to investigate public corruption. Piece by piece, he was making the case that this wasn't random dysfunction. It was a deliberate shift in priorities. And then he moved to the issue that may have been the most politically explosive of all, cryptocurrency enforcement. This is where the hearing took on an even bigger significance, because now the questions weren't just about staffing. They were about money, influence, and potential conflicts of interest tied to one of the most powerful people in the country. Neguse asked Bondi how many people currently work in the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team. Again, the question was direct. Again, it was basic. And again, Bondi didn't answer. She tried to return to earlier points. She tried to circle back to the public integrity section. But Neguse stayed locked in. How many people work there? It should have been an easy answer. Either the team is staffed, or it isn't. Either the DOJ is actively policing crypto fraud, scams, and illicit financial activity, or it's not. But the number never came. And in that silence, Neguse delivered what may have been his sharpest accusation of the day. He said Bondi didn't want to answer because the team had effectively been eliminated. That allegation instantly raised the stakes. The National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team isn't some niche office dealing with obscure tech disputes. Crypto has become one of the fastest-moving areas for fraud, money laundering concerns, and financial misconduct. In a world where billions can move in seconds across borders, enforcement matters. So when the Attorney General won't say how many people are assigned to policing that space, people notice. Neguse knew that, and he took the next step carefully but forcefully. He suggested that weakening crypto enforcement while President Trump has major financial interests connected to cryptocurrency raises serious questions. To be clear, Neguse framed this as an allegation and concern, not an established fact. But politically, the implication was massive. If enforcement has been reduced in an area where the president stands to benefit financially, then this is no longer just about administrative choices. It becomes a question about whether policy is being shaped around personal interests. That was the heart of Neguse's strategy. He wasn't just accusing Bondi of making bad decisions. He was trying to show a consistent pattern, loyalty being rewarded, oversight being weakened, and politically inconvenient questions being avoided. And what made the hearing so damaging for Bondi was that she never found a way to break that pattern. Every time Neguse asked something concrete, She either shifted topics or tried to widen the frame. But that only made the exchange feel more lopsided. Because viewers watching at home don't grade hearings based on procedural details. They notice tone. They notice confidence. And they notice when someone who should be in command suddenly looks evasive. As the hearing wore on, frustration in the room became impossible to hide. Neguse pointed out that these weren't trick questions. He wasn't asking Bondi to speculate. He wasn't demanding classified information. He was asking about her own department. How many people work in key units? Why were those units reduced? What standards are being used when hiring? These are the exact kinds of questions oversight hearings exist to address. But instead of answers, the session became increasingly chaotic. The chairman had to step in. Members interrupted. Time disputes broke out. What should have been a conventional oversight session turned into a public display of breakdown. And that's often when hearings become most revealing. Not when officials deliver polished statements, but when the structure starts cracking and instincts take over. Bondi came into this hearing expecting to project authority. Instead, by the end, the dominant image was an attorney general struggling to contain the fallout from a series of unanswered questions. That matters because in Washington, perception can become reality very quickly. You don't need a viral shouting match for damage to happen. Sometimes the most devastating moments are quieter. A pause, a dodge, a refusal to say a number that should be easy to say. Neguse seemed to understand that from the start. He wasn't trying to create a spectacle for its own sake. He was creating a record of contradictions, missing answers, and uncomfortable gaps in transparency. And that's why this hearing is likely to stick. Not because one side scored a flashy line, but because the exchange raised deeper questions that won't disappear when the cameras turn off. Why is someone with that January 6th history working at DOJ? What really happened to the public integrity section? What is the current state of crypto enforcement? Are oversight safeguards being reduced at the exact moment they matter most? Those are questions bigger than one hearing, bigger than one clip, bigger even than Bondi herself. They go to the core of whether institutions meant to protect the public are being reshaped in ways the public still doesn't fully understand. By the time Neguse yielded back, the room had changed. The hearing that began as routine oversight had become a credibility test. And in moments like this, the absence of answers can sometimes do more damage than a bad answer ever could. Because once the public starts sensing that basic facts are being withheld, trust erodes fast. That was the real story here. Not just a clash between a congressman and an attorney general, but a revealing glimpse into how power responds when it's finally pressed with specifics. Neguse didn't need theatrics. He let the record speak. And what that record suggested was deeply uncomfortable for Bondi. The next time officials talk about transparency, accountability, and standing with law enforcement, people are going to remember this hearing. They're going to remember the video clip, the staffing questions, the crypto silence, the visible frustration, and the sense that for a few very telling minutes, the script stopped working. This wasn't just another political sparring match. It was a moment where a carefully managed image cracked under pressure. And whether Bondi's team likes it or not, that image is now out there for millions to judge. If you thought this hearing was intense, just wait until the next oversight showdown, because the questions around DOJ decisions are only getting bigger. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Was Neguse exposing real accountability gaps, or was this political theater? And if you want more sharp breakdowns of the biggest hearings, investigations, and power clashes happening right now, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with the channel, because the next explosive moment could happen any day.